We will now begin the regular press conference for Minister Motegi. Please go ahead, Minister. No initial remarks from my side. No initial remarks, but the MOFA-related bills that have been presented to the current session of the Diet and the various treaties and conventions have now passed. So I have extended my appreciation to the members of the ruling and opposition parties. Those of you who have questions, please raise your hand, use the closest microphone, and identify yourself and your affiliation.
Mr. Susilo, please. I am a newspaper journalist from Indonesia. My name is Susilo Richard. Regarding the ban on entry into Japan by foreign nationals, I understand that there may be partial relaxation. 4 countries, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand, and Vietnam, are being discussed. These 4 countries, and limiting to business travel, easing of the restrictions on entry was decided. And my question is that, for example, out of these 4 countries, if it is from Australia, the purpose not for business but for tourism, can it be accepted? And what are the criteria for relaxation of the travel restrictions? I believe one of the criteria is the number of people infected by the novel coronavirus. What are the other criteria for relaxation of the entry restrictions? For example, from my country, Indonesia, when can visitors be accepted?
On the question just raised, in past press conferences, I have repeatedly made several comments and explained. At this moment in time, for certain countries, from when will we be able to resume travel by people? There is no decision made. No decision has been made on this issue, and as I have repeatedly said, we will take into consideration whether the expansion of outbreak has subsided in Japan. This is one of the most important issues, and also with the contribution of the Japanese people and the healthcare workers, the situation has been placed under control in Japan to a certain extent. But at the same time, we need to watch closely the situation of outbreak in other countries, as well as the responses taken by major countries. For example, in Europe, where there had been expansion of infection, Schengen Agreement-based travel has resumed. And the European Commission has mentioned that from July the 1st, that they will allow for travel from and to outside of the EU. They are studying such matters and to relax the situation and restrictions in a phased manner. So that's a proposal that has been presented by the European Commission. So in deciding on the resumption of travel by people, there would not be any blanket allowance. This will be done only in a phased manner. So in the initial phase, business persons or experts will be allowed, or essential people necessary for Japan, like technical interns and trainees, for phase 1. And then in the next phase, we will allow students, and ultimately we will expand the scope to the general public, including tourists. And for countries as well, we will begin with group of countries where the outbreak has subsided to a certain extent, and then gradually expand the scope of countries to which we allow for travel. So on the possibility of allowing resumption of travel by people, the other day with Vietnam, Australia, and New Zealand, I spoke with the foreign ministers through the telephone meeting with the foreign ministers of Vietnam, New Zealand, and Australia. But at this juncture, no decision has been made on any specific country. Next question, please. Yes. Inai-san. Inami of Toyo Keizai. My question is a related question as well, and it relates to the immigration restrictions. First of all, with more than one country, you are doing negotiations. And how is the counterpart countries? How are the counterpart countries evaluating the situation of outbreak in Japan? Can I go to the next question?
I would like to answer the first question first. Rather than having negotiations regarding the possibility of easing on travel restrictions, discussions have started. With not only with countries with which we have started discussions, but regarding the novel coronavirus countermeasures in Japan, etc. I believe that there is high evaluation with foreign ministers of more than 40 countries in the past few months. I have had telephone conferences and video conferences with the foreign ministers of more than 40 countries. And in these exchanges, I can report that there was an expression of high appreciation to the countermeasures taken by Japan. But the novel coronavirus has spread all over the world. It is not possible to contain it single-handedly by one country. International coordination and cooperation will be extremely important. Japan is calling for international coordination and about health systems in developing countries. Health systems is vulnerable, and Japan is active in providing aid to such countries. And is calling for aid to such countries from international communities. Thank you very much. Moving on to the second question, in emigrating and immigrating to and from countries, over time situation may change in the counterpart countries. How will the Ministry of Foreign Affairs monitor the situations in counterpart countries? And how will criteria for allowance of entry be changed?
The numbers, do they change minute by minute, second by second? Of course, the daily number of people infected will change on daily basis, but we will look at various criteria, including new infections and how that has increased or declined on weekly basis, and also in issuing the risk for infectious diseases. We also take into consideration the outbreak situation in the counterpart countries as well as the robustness of the healthcare system. And as I have said repeatedly, when considering the resumption of travel by people, in principle, with the counterpart countries, it would be desirable if relaxation can be done on reciprocal basis. Even if it is not done at the exactly same timing, we do not hope to see much time lag in between the lifting of the restrictions. Next question, please, Abe-san. Abe of Yomiuri Newspapers. I have a question on the assistance to emerging countries. In Southeast Asia and Africa, a grant is being provided for medical equipment and supplied. What are the needs that is being gathered from those countries to Japan? What are they requesting from Japan as China conducts its facial mask diplomacy? What do you think is the characteristics of Japanese diplomatic policy?
I just mentioned now, in order to respond to the threats of novel coronavirus, international coordination is extremely important, especially providing aid to developing countries with vulnerable health systems to contain the spread of infection is an urgent challenge for the international community, including Japan. Therefore, Japan would like to advocate such aid and would like to lead in efforts to provide such aid. In the first supplementary budget, For the purpose of providing medical equipment to developing countries, grant aid was included. To provide such aid to around 100 countries, I was also deeply engaged in the discussion, and progress is made with unprecedented speed. Up to today, cabinet decisions have been made for countries, more than half of the countries, with Myanmar, Cambodia, Maldives, and Marshall Islands included. With 9 countries, exchange of notes had been signed. There are various different needs from developing countries, and needs are different from country to country. Utilizing high technology of Japan, medical equipment or ambulance can be provided in beds and stretchers, and various medical appliances that will be in need in hospitals are areas where needs are expressed as soon as possible so that we can provide such aid. Preparations are underway. Different countries have different strengths. We can complement each other, and overall, aid to developing countries should be provided. I believe that is the ideal way. As for the characteristics of aid from Japan, grant aid is provided. Usually, it takes more time, but it is currently implemented in a very speedy fashion in an unprecedented way. That is one of the characteristics. Rather than individual supplies limited to surgical masks, depending on the healthcare system of the counterpart country, we are providing aid so that it will assist in strengthening their system. Next question, please. Kato-san. I'm Kato from Nikkei newspaper. I have a question regarding Hong Kong situation. Yesterday, the Prime Minister said that experts may be accepted from Financial Center of Hong Kong in his response in the deliberations in the Budget Committee in the Upper House. Given the situation in Hong Kong, it seems that there is some development of people migrating to outside of Hong Kong. What is the view of Japanese government, and what will be the response? And how will Japan prepare to receive such people?
First of all, relaxation of border measures related to COVID-19 or resumption of people travel, the issue you raised is a separate issue from those items. The resolution over Hong Kong and the recent development in Hong Kong are issues that we have grave concerns over. Yesterday, there was this discussion over the ideal form of a financial center. And the Prime Minister mentioned that Tokyo needs to continue to be an attractive business hub for the financial sector, and for Tokyo to further develop as an international city that can absorb human resources, information, and capital. From the perspective of socioeconomic vitalization and further internationalization, since there are abundant, high-skilled human resources in Hong Kong, we have been actively promoting the acceptance of foreign human resources in specific areas with high level of skills and expertise. That has been done conventionally. We will continue to monitor the situation over COVID-19. But from the mid to long-term perspective, we will continue to coordinate with the relevant ministries and agencies and to continue to promote our policy for acceptance of foreign human resources. Are there any other questions? If not, then we will end the press conference. Thank you for coming.